وسنزداد بعد اليوم إيمانا ويقينا بالله عز وجل وأننا سننتصر على مكرهم وعلى استكبارهم والله معنا والله غالب على أمرهم.
This was a day of terror in the capital of Yemen. Rebel TV in the city reports at least 137 people died and some 350 were wounded in a wave of bombings. A stunned witness said blood was running like a river. It was the deadliest attack in decades in a country torn by strife. 4 bombings rocked 2 crowded mosques during Friday prayers. Amid the carnage, men frantically tended to the wounded. Blood and debris littered the street, and witnesses tried to make sense of what happened.
We were in the mosque during the sermon. We first heard an explosion outside near the security perimeter. When the first explosion happened, they used the chaos to enter the mosque in the middle of prayer and blow us up from inside the building.
Both mosques are controlled by Shiite Houthi rebels who stormed the capital last fall and are said to have Iran's backing. The rebels control a growing swath of northern Yemen and have extended their reach westward. They have battled the Sunni-dominated al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which holds sway in much of central Yemen. Adding to the chaos, the Islamic State group, also Sunni, claimed today's bombings and warned of a flood of attacks to oust the Houthis. That drew a skeptical response in Washington.
It does appear that these kinds of claims are often made for a perception that they have that it benefits their propaganda efforts.
The U.S. has struggled to maintain any influence in Yemen through President Abd Rabbo Mansour Hadi. He was chased from the capital, and his loyalists are now fighting to hold a power base in the south. I'm going to take a closer look at today's violence in Yemen and what it says about the state of that region. Joining me now is Nabil Khouri. He had a career in the Foreign Service and was the Deputy Chief of Mission in Yemen for the State Department from 2004 to 2007. Welcome to the program.
Happy to be here.
So a terrible situation today. Over 130 were killed, over 300 wounded, worst violence in decades. How do you explain this?
Well, this attack was perpetrated against the Houthi in principle, who are in charge in Sana'a. But unfortunately, a soft target was chosen, meaning a mosque where Zaidi Yemenis go.
This is Zaidi, a particular
Zaidism
group?
is a part of Shia Islam. Mm-hmm. It broke off Shia Islam centuries ago. But it's closer to Shiaism than it is to Sunni Islam.
So these are vulnerable sites, these mosques.
They're vulnerable because they're not well protected. They're also, I think the attackers, probably ISIS, mean to inject a sectarian tone to the chaos and to the fighting that's already taking place. Up to now, Yemenis have not really been against one another on a religious basis. They're divided tribally, they're divided according to regions of the country. But the fact is that the north has a lot of Zaidi Shia Muslims and the south Sunni. And ISIS is likely trying to play on that, hoping to recruit a lot of Sunni fundamentalists to their cause.
ISIS being Sunni, having Sunni roots. Today we heard from ISIS made a statement saying they claiming responsibility. From the White House, from the administration, though, we heard some skepticism about that they weren't ready to accept that.
Right. Well, there's always skepticism when something like that happens, and before any real intelligence comes in or any real indication, any real proof, But so I think at this point, though, since I don't work for the White House, I can speculate and analyze. And I think it's likely. ISIS does not have a major presence in Yemen, but they have declared the beginning of a cell for themselves there. They are competing with Al-Qaeda for influence. And I wouldn't be too surprised if it was a small group of them that did this.
So how does that fit in, though, to what ISIS is doing? We know they are very active in Iraq and in Syria. How does this fit into that? You said you called it a cell. Does that mean they are tightly connected to Iraq, Syria, ISIS, or not?
Well, they could be tightly connected, or they could simply be Yemenis inspired by ISIS. ISIS's strength is north in Syria and in Iraq. But they have declared that they would like to establish an Islamic caliphate all over the Arab Muslim world. So having a foothold in Yemen would be good for their expansion. But Yemen is so chaotic and there are so many fighting factions there that ISIS will probably not make a big dent there.
Well, where does this leave the situation, though, in Yemen? Because you have the president who's fled the capital, is off.
Now he's fled his palace in the south.
Fled the palace in the south. You have the Al-Qaeda, I guess, in the north. You have the Houthis have taken over. Who's in charge?
Well, the Houthis are in charge in Sana'a and north of Sana'a all the way to the Saudi border. But in Sana'a itself, they're not fully in charge. I mean, they have taken over government offices and army barracks, but they are challenged every day. So further south, in other words, the areas of Aden, the areas of Taiz, the areas of the Hadramaut, there are factions who are all against the Houthis, but they are not united.
And what about the United States? The U.S. was seen as backing the president, who's not in, who's nowhere to be found right now.
Yes.
What is the U.S. policy in Yemen?
Well, U.S. policy is to cling on to the legitimacy of the presidency of President Hadi in Yemen, because he was genuinely elected by his people. The U.S. position is also to cling to the national dialogue, the negotiations that have been going on between various factions of Yemen, led by a United Nations envoy. But realistically, the president of Yemen no longer controls even a quarter of Yemen, and the national dialogue has come to a dead end. There is a dead heat, a struggle for power in Yemen. The Houthis are the strongest in the country. If they are not seriously opposed, they could take over the whole country.
And so we watch to see how U.S. policy develops.
We watch to see. The U.S. so far has not had any contacts with the Houthis, so them taking over the whole country is not good news for the U.S.
Nabil Khoury, we thank you very much for being with us.
Happy to be here.
Yemen brought a new appeal and a warning today. The U.S.-backed president, Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi, called for Gulf Arab nations to intervene against Shiite rebels allied with Iran. On Sunday, the rebels seized Yemen's third-largest city, Taiz, and threatened to push south to Aden, where President Hadi has taken refuge. In response, Saudi Arabia warned the Arab states will act to protect Yemen against the rebel advance.